Hello and welcome then to episode 12. In this week's episode, we're going to be looking at general tips for teachers and how they can basically support behaviour in a school, both for SLT, for students, for parents, and for other colleagues. Okay, let's do this. Welcome then to this week's episode, episode 12, as we said. So we're looking at how to kind of support behaviour in schools and help colleagues, other teachers, parents, students, everything, but really just that a teacher can do. So we've looked at lots of things. Last week we looked at low-level disruption, and we'll come back to kind of behaviour types that cause problems in the classroom in the future. We mentioned that last week, but over the next few weeks we're going to have a couple of guests coming in. We've got someone lined up for one of our episodes coming in the next few weeks, so we look forward to that. We're going to talk about their role, what they've done, their experience in schools, and what they kind of see with behaviour at the moment, and the fact that behaviour is changing across the country at the moment. We've got kind of like a national issue with behaviour. It's kind of an effect of COVID. It's still having impact on schools. Schools are still dealing with stuff. We've got a lot more students now just struggling a little bit more in schools, and we need to find ways to support them. So some of the strategies we're going to go through today, some of the things that you can do, hopefully will guide you, whether you're a new teacher, seasoned veteran, anything else. It's always good to remind yourself to kind of sharpen that sword, going back to the 7 habits again. So I've got a list here basically of 10 things that you can do that are, I think, essential. There's probably more, but it's just the 10 things that I think off the top of my head that I think, hey, do you know what, these are going to make a difference. So first thing is, starting off, behaviour is not just about what's in the classroom. It is about everywhere around the school, and you've got to remember that. Sometimes when I see teachers struggling with behaviour, it's because they have this kind of blinkers on mentality where they're going around the school, and what they're doing is, if they see something in the corridor, they just think, and it particularly happens in kind of schools that tend to have a bit more of a toxic environment where they're not supported by other colleagues or SLT, and so teachers quite rightly so just put their heads down, just think, I'll just get to my classroom. If I can get to my classroom, I might just be able to survive this day. Well, really, what you need to be doing is, if everyone plays a part, behaviour is just like safeguarding. It's everyone's responsibility. So that's like my first number one tip is, behaviour is not just in the classroom. It's outside the classroom. It's at lunchtime. It's at break time. It's the start of the day, end of the day, in corridors. What that basically means is that, have that presence permanently. You will get a reputation for dealing with behaviour, and someone who students won't necessarily mess with in the best possible way if you are tackling behaviour. So in other words, don't walk past something. If you see someone drop something litter on the floor, challenge them. If you see someone not in uniform, say to them, hey, your shirt's not tucked in. All right, everyone should be challenging behaviour at all times, and then following that up as well. So that's like my number one tip is, basically, behaviour is everywhere outside the classroom, and that includes those conversations. It's really powerful to go and have lunch with students, to eat with them, to have dialogue with them outside the classroom, to do activities, and that even kind of stems into extracurricular or going on trips. Things like we've just had our school show in the last week or so, and that's really powerful to go and see students, particularly students who are performing in that show, who might normally get into trouble. It's really powerful to see them, and then when you see them the next day, say, hey, well done, I saw you last night, it was brilliant. They realise actually that you care about them, and ultimately behaviour is all about showing students that you care, because that's the most powerful tool. Punishment will go so far, but actually showing that you care about them, and then almost like not taking that away as, like, it sounds really horrible when you say taking away caring about them. It's not like taking away permanently, it's just saying that phrase of, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. That's kind of the most powerful tool, because if you can just sit down and say, look, I'm not happy where you've been at the moment, I do want to get things back on track, but we just need a little bit of time to sort this out, and then we'll sort it out afterwards, we'll get back to normal, but you just need to know it's not acceptable. That's far more powerful than saying, right, you've got an hour's detention, which really doesn't mean anything to a student, and actually all does just antagonise me more. So that's tip number one. Number two, don't use humour and sarcasm. I've seen it happen so many times where staff think they're saying things that are, you know, helping things, like, well, of course you do that, that's who you are, or, you know, you're never going to make anything of yourself. That negative language all the time, or being sarcastic, which is the worst one really, just antagonises students. And don't get me wrong, I've been there and done it myself. I've said things that I shouldn't have done, and I've learned the hard way. So it's just really a tip for other people who are new, to say, it's very easy to fall into that trap of just thinking, well, if I just make that comment, it's kind of like my way of dealing with the emotional hurt of what they're doing, because you're kind of, it's coming back to that tit for tat thing where you're saying something just to get back at them because it makes you feel better. Ultimately, if it's just making you feel better, that's not helpful to the child. So you've got to avoid it at all costs. All it does is antagonise things. The student will say something that they shouldn't do, and you will be to blame because you've gone down that route of basically going to the lower level, whereas really you should be sort of, you know, rising above it and not letting it get to you. It's difficult, it's hard, but that's tip number 2. Don't use humour and sarcasm. Don't get me wrong, there's a place for humour in schools when you've built relationships, and it's good to have that kind of banter sometimes with students, but it has to be appropriate, it has to be at the right time, and you have to know your students. And I would always say, if you get it wrong, that's on you, so judge it well. Number 3, always be honest. If you've done something, you've made a mistake, you've messed up, don't lie about it. Once you get a reputation for lying and covering up your own mistakes, you'll never be trusted by students, and trust is number 1 thing. One of the things I've always prided myself in all of the schools I've ever worked in is that I have a reputation for telling the truth, even if I've done something wrong. So even if I said something stupid, like we talked about sarcasm and stuff before, and then students got in trouble for what they've said, I've turned around and gone, yeah, do you know what, I said that I shouldn't have done, but you know, at the time it really annoyed me and I said something inappropriate. We're all human. That honesty will serve you so much more with students, because they'll then go, well, actually you're all right. And I have had that said to me before. Again, it's coming from experience where a student has turned around to me and just said, do you know, I thought you would have lied about it, but you didn't. And I said, well, I'm trying to model the behaviour I expect from you. And it's one of my key phrases. I say, we model the behaviour we expect from students. If we can't demonstrate that, how can we expect them to? We've got to be that kind of the adult that they look up to, because it might, you know, we might be the only decent adult that they come into contact with, and that's the whole point of, you know, as adults in the school, is we should be modelling the behaviour we expect to see from them. So be honest, number 3. Next, we're looking at follow up on the small things, sweat the small things. You've probably heard that phrase before. Uniform, great starting point. If you pick up on the small things, I've this general kind of philosophy that if a student's more worried about whether they've got the tie and shirt sorted, then they're less likely to be kicking off and swearing. Again, making sure we deal with it appropriately, but it's those small things that if you sweat the small things, they're too busy thinking, well, I've got to make sure I've got the right shoes, and I've got to make sure my shirt's tucked in, and I've got to make sure that I'm on time. If you do all of that, then they're not going to be worrying about having fights and swearing at people. It will still happen with some students, because unfortunately that's just the circumstances that they're surrounding them in, where they've had, you know, a tough sort of morning at home, or they've fallen out with siblings, or they've had an argument with one of the best friends. All those sort of things come into play as well. But ultimately, if you deal with the small stuff and focus on the small stuff and support them, sweat the small things, then they'll be too busy focused on that, which means they haven't got time for the other stuff. So that's number 4. Number 5, call home, just call home. Okay, any opportunity, call home, and that's a positive as well. I must emphasize that, and that's kind of the key point really with this one, is call home as often as you can, and always try and call when there's a good thing. So often when we talk about behavior, people, you know, it's like complaints. People only make complaints because they're bothered and annoyed. We very rarely send compliments to people, and there's another point coming up later on my 10 list here about positive stuff. But more often than not, people are very quick to complain, but not quick to make the phone calls home. If you're, you know, making a phone call home, it's a bit like that, you know, 3 stars and a wish type thing, you know, or whatever. If you're making 1 bad phone call home, try and make at least 2 positive. And that's really easy for me to sit here and say, but ultimately we should be trying to make more positive phone calls, because that's going to have more impact than the negative ones. But more often than not, we get bogged down with the negative phone calls, because it's the stuff that bothers us more. But really, we should be more bothered about the student who completed all their work today and did really, really well and got everything right. Why aren't we phoning for those? Because ultimately, that's what we want, and that's what we should be putting more time into. And if we did more of that, I've talked about the power of praise before. When I've done days in school where we focused on praise, behaviour dramatically improves. So it just says that if we get those phone calls home, and you know, I had a meeting with a parent the other day and they just said, oh, I really like, you know, the positive postcards home. Of course they do, why wouldn't they? The thing, if you listen to any of the Paul Dick stuff before, and it's really interesting, go and look him up and get his details, get the kind of books and stuff that he's got out there. He says that, you know, the power of a postcard is not just for the parent or the carer or the guardian in his home. The power of that praise and postcard is about the fact they put it on the fridge, and when the neighbour comes round, or the other family, you know, auntie, uncle comes and sees it, then there's a dialogue with them, and they're proud of the student and the son or the daughter as well, and so it gets spread amongst the family. And so that praise isn't just about that small kind of connection between mum and the student, or dad and the student. It's about the wider family recognising that and building that student's confidence up. So positive praise is really important. So call home, but also call home obviously for the negative stuff as well. And don't let small things, don't just think, oh well, I really can't be bothered with that, it's not that important. If it bothered you to log it, or it bothered you to disturb the lesson, then you need to follow up on it. So calling home, positive and negative, that's our kind of tip number 5. Number 6, meet parents. Don't be afraid to meet them. Get them in, talk to them. Okay, so start with education first. It comes back to our scripted conversations, which we talked about in other videos. Scripted conversations, have it planned out what you're going to say. Start off with the positive stuff first. Don't just go straight for the jugular and say, your son, daughter's been doing this, I'm not happy, blah, blah, blah. Just say, I really need your help and support. I need you as parents. You know your son or daughter better than I do. I know them pretty well because, I teach them, I've got to know them. But I need your help. I need you to support me on this because it's all about their education. Their education's suffering because they're messing around in lessons, they're disturbing other people, hurting other people. They're going to get themselves into more trouble when thinking about their future. I always talk about like kind of timelines in terms of like school's kind of like this much and their whole life is like massive, and this much hard work will affect their kind of future. So have those scripted conversations ready, but get parents in and get the parents in for good things as well. So we've just done some reviews of behaviour. We've done some sort of head teacher panels, and in one of those meetings, we've talked about a student who wasn't doing particularly well and then started to do really well, and we still had the panel because there was data and things there that we were looking at, and then they've had a couple of little bumps on the way where they've done things wrong, but actually as part of that meeting we talked a lot about the praise of what they've done really well and how we were going to move forwards. So you can have meetings for positive things as well, particularly if a student's not been doing great and you've got them then back in for a meeting. If they're on a pastoral support program, PSP or something like that, you can have meetings to talk about positive stuff as well. But meet parents, get them in, because it's so powerful to get that conversation. And my top tip with meeting parents is never start the meeting with the child in the actual meeting, because you need to kind of iron out the rules of engagement, so to speak before you have that meeting. So you bring them in, you say, hey, look, really pleased, thank you for coming in, I just need to go through a few things, and then get to the point eventually saying, look, it's really important if we're going to get the best out of Johnny and his time in this school, what I need is for us to be on the same page, because ultimately it's about his education. I'm sure you'd agree with that. And when you're kind of having those conversations, ask questions to confirm that they agree with you. It's part of the kind of bringing them on board with the kind of the way that you're thinking and the culture of the school. So say like, I'm sure you'd agree that his education is really important. Oh yes, it is. Right, so if we're in agreement that's important, then we need to do this, and bring them round to what you want them to do to support you in a positive way, and then bring the child in. And you bring the child into the meeting and say, look, we've been talking, we're united. The child sees you two on the same page. They know that, for one of the phrase that an old head teacher and I used to use before was say, you couldn't get a cigarette paper between us because we were so close and we worked really closely on everything together. And it's the way it should be with parents and teachers. We should be working together. We are looking at the interests of the student. They are at the centre of everything that we do. And so have that conversation with them first and bring the child into the meeting. So meeting parents, that's tip number 6. Really, really crucial to improving behaviour. Don't wait to get them in. Number 7 is support your colleagues. So don't undermine them. That doesn't mean, if someone's dealing with a child in the corridors, don't just walk up and go, I've got this, and take over, because they might be doing perfectly fine, but you could just stand by nearby, just listening and be there to be supportive and kind of, agree with things, or if things aren't going right, you can kind of support, but kind of gauge off them and talk to them about whether they need your support or not. Don't go in there and be like, oh, they behave for me, because that's the standard one, isn't it? That most people say is, oh, such and such is a nightmare. Oh, well, they behave for me in my lesson. I hear that so many times, it just antagonises people. Support them in the corridor. So if you see them dealing with someone, say, is everything okay? Can I help? And how you say that's really, really important. Don't just say, can I help because I'm better than you. It's kind of saying, is there anything I can help with? Do you need anything? Do you want me just to stand here while you're talking to them? And if you develop a culture of that within the school, people will naturally get used to you being around anyway. It's something I try to do is I'll walk along and I kind of give eye contact to people as if to say, everything okay? Do you want me to stay here? And people will often say, no, it's fine, I've got it, thank you, sir. Or actually, if it's all right, if you could just stay for us, sir, that'd be fantastic. And it's like, yeah, not a problem, I'm here to help. Don't walk past things, don't put the blinkers on, don't keep your head down. And this is just normal staff. This isn't about middle leaders and SLT. This is normal staff supporting each other, because it's incredibly useful to have that person there to draw on, and also as backup, really. So support your colleagues, check in if they need the support. That's number 7. Number 8, never walk past something. So it comes back to what we said before about, challenge everything, pick up on everything, support colleagues. You don't walk past something, don't put your head down. If you see something, deal with it, tackle it. A bit like that kind of behaviour is not inside the classroom. It's very similar to number 1, really, that talked about, but you just don't walk past. You have to challenge everything as if it's your kind of classroom. If you walk past it, then you're permitting it. And basically you're saying it's okay. And it sends a message, whether it's directly, subconsciously, sort of thing. or so conscious or subconscious, you are sending a message to those students. It's like, I accept that. If you walk past a student and you throw something on the floor, if they're in the canteen and they just leave the food on the table, you just say, hey, excuse me, could we tidy up, about expectations, courtesy for other people. If you ignore it, they will know. Don't pretend and think, oh, if I just look this way, they haven't seen me. They will know. They'll have seen you, and you're basically saying, that's okay, well done, brilliant, keep doing that. That's what you're saying. You're condoning it. So you don't walk past anything. That's number 8. Number 9, follow up, follow up, follow up. Never let something go. And what I mean by that is, if it's something that's not right, we talked about policies before, read through policy, know your behaviour policy. If you know if someone's broken a rule or something and you're following up, do chase it. Be respectful when you're chasing it. By that, what I mean by that is pastoral teams are incredibly busy, and I'll come to number 10, which I think is one of the important ones. Pastoral teams are very, very busy, and so do chase things up. If you've not heard any feedback about something, you don't know what's happening, so go and talk to them. Don't send them the snotty email saying, well, I haven't heard anything, you've not told me this. And I've had these before when people have said, well, I thought I was going to be kept in the loop on this and you didn't bother to tell me. It's like, no, I just was really busy and I dealt with it. I've issued the sanction, I've sorted that student out, and I just haven't got back to you yet because we're so busy. It's like, pastoral teams deal with loads of students. If you've just got one issue with a student, it's not difficult for you to go and talk to that pastoral team, say, hey, could you just let me know, how did that go? Was everything all right? Is there anything you need me to do? It's about supporting your pastoral team. If you just send them that kind of, and I do call it the snotty email, where it's just like, well, you haven't done this, you're just antagonizing the people who are trying to help you. And the pastoral team are there to serve you and help you. They're there to basically deal with the behavior so you can teach and do your bit. So don't get funny with them. All right, support them. And that leads me on to number 10, which is my big one. And it's really difficult to say it in your own school, so I'm going to put it out on this really, just so people can share it and share it with other people, with other colleagues and other schools. And this is the crucial one, okay? Pastoral teams, and forgive me for this, but I'm going to say the word, they deal with the crap all day. They deal with all the stuff from students when they're rude and causing people problems. They deal with the parents when they come in and kick off and they're not happy about stuff and complaints. They deal with teachers when they're not happy. All right, so they get it from all angles. They get it from all angles. And sometimes they also get it from the top, because top will turn around and go, well, we've had this incident, what's happened, why haven't you dealt with it? Well, I was too busy dealing with such and such, who'd done this and he'd done that. And so for some of the pastoral team, and I think this is the key one, I really want this, my top tip for teachers, is recognise that your pastoral team is there to support and serve you. So this is tip number 10. They're there to deal with the behaviour so you can teach. And it comes back to that kind of how much praise and reward we give people. We're very quick to give it attention, phone home when someone doesn't do something right. And we're very quick. So if you've got an on-call system, and this is a classic, and I've seen this happen many times, so this is how you can help. This is how you can help improve the culture and behaviour within the school. When on-call doesn't turn up sometimes to remove a child from your lesson, don't send the email going, where were they? Why didn't they turn up? By all means, follow it up and find out. But think about the amount of times they do turn up, where they don't question anything, they support you, they take them out of the classroom, and you don't bother to send any message to say thank you. Because it's never about the 99 things that a pastoral team does well. It's about the one thing they slip up on that bothers everyone. And if you want to be a really supportive, good teacher who can help support the behaviour system in schools, support your pastoral team, because I tell you what, they'll fight for you, they'll help you, they'll be there for you, they'll back you up, they'll always come and support whenever there's a problem. Don't be that person who sends that email or has a moan about them because they didn't do something, because I guarantee 9 times out of 10 they're backing you up all the time. And if they drop the ball on something, just have that little bit of forgiveness. By all means, follow up and mention it in a polite way, but don't send that email going, you didn't do this, why didn't that happen? If anything, if you're going to send any email, send a positive one saying, really thank you for your support today. And that's kind of like my message really, is as number 10, if you want to support the pastoral system and your school culture and behaviour, is praise the pastoral team. And I'm not talking about overpraise, but just recognise the fact that they deal with so many negative things all day. I know some pastoral support members who will literally just deal with one incident after another. It's all negative. It's all kind of like, students arguing with them. They're trying to settle it down because there's been a fallout with another teacher. There's a parent called in complaining because their child's been bullied. Nothing's been done about it. And those are all standard things that happen. Or the other classic one is a child gets a detention. So what do they call up the head of year or the pastoral team complaining because the teacher didn't do this, they didn't give them no warning, they didn't follow up on it, they've not called home for all this sort of stuff, and the pastoral team gets all of that kind of plaque, and they take the brunt for you. So please, number 10, support the pastoral team. Just send them a thank you, send them a thank you card, just an email, something for everything they do. By all means, follow up on stuff when it doesn't happen. You should do. Just be mindful that, you know, these people who are there to support you, and that's my number 10 tip if you want to help the pastoral and behaviour system and culture within your school, is support the pastoral team. So we've gone over on our time this week. It's a little bit longer. Like I said, we will have a guest in a couple of episodes time. If you're interested, if you're a teacher out there and you're thinking you've got something to contribute, you're welcome to send me a message and we'll try and get you on as well. I'm opening it up to that a little bit more to kind of get more in there, and we're going to do a couple of other things as well on the kind of YouTube side of things. Obviously this goes out on my other podcast kind of platforms, but on YouTube we're going to be looking at some resources and things that you can use within the classroom, particularly around PowerPoint. So if it's something you're interested in, we're going to put some PowerPoints together with timers embedded and certain slides and stuff with the I go, we go, you go. So if that's something you're interested in, keep an eye out for that. That's going to come on the channel as well, as we kind of develop things a little bit wider and build kind of more resources for teachers, along with obviously developing these videos and episodes on how to support you with behaviour in the classroom. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care. Thanks.